Sometimes all you need is a good book and a cup of tea. Sometimes all you need is a good book and a cup of tea. So in today's video, we're going to be sipping tea. I've got myself this delicious London fog in this beautiful mug that I reserved specifically for reading. And we're gonna be discussing the books. I've got a big stack of books right here. We're gonna be discussing the books that inspired my book, Aurora and Luna, which is the first book in the new character-driven high fantasy epic, the Sun and Moon Saga. Aurora and Luna just recently got re-released in this brand new edition with a brand new cover illustrated by me, and I would absolutely love it if you went and picked up a copy yourself. The links are in the doobly-doo. I've been putting out a lot of videos about Aurora and Luna, and I would love it if you went and checked them out after watching this video, of course. But in today's video, we are going to discuss the books that inspired this book. I worked on this book for about a decade, and there was a lot of different inspirations that went into it. And today we're going to talk about those things. Most of them books, but also some movies, some video games. Let's just dive right in. I think we're just going to start from the very beginning with the first, not the first novel I ever read, but the first fantasy novel I ever read. And I'm really going to be showing my age here as a millennial. It's Harry Potter. Obviously. My book was very inspired by Harry Potter, mostly just in the sense that this is the book that made me want to be a fantasy author. I was already into creative writing as a kid, but this was the first fantasy novel that I read. And I vividly remember reading this as a kid and having it read to me by my parents and thinking, but wait, aren't witches evil? Isn't magic kind of dangerous? Because my experience of witches and witchcraft was primarily through fairy tales and folklore. So this was a very different experience of magic. You know, it wasn't that magic was all good either. There was a dark side to it, and I fell in love with the Harry Potter world. Honestly, I don't really have enough time to get into it here, and also I just want to say that this book is not without its flaws. The author is not without her flaws, and I do feel a little weird mentioning it, especially when I revisit this work now. I do find the plot holes, I do find the problems with the story and with the writing, and yet I still love it, and I just don't think I'm ever going to be able to view it with a purely objective lens, because it's literally the book that got me into reading and eventually writing fantasy novels. Yeah, I love Harry Potter. I'm a Potterhead, and my book was very inspired by Harry Potter. The magic system is fairly similar. There's a lot of inspiration taken from the magic system, especially in the sense that it's both hard and soft magic. There is a hard magic system, and that's what the characters primarily use day to day. But then there's also a soft magic system. There's a spiritual, mystical, unknown side of magic that seems to rule over the world, and the characters don't necessarily always understand exactly how it works, the way they do their hard magic system, the way they do their practical magic. We really don't have time to deep dive into Harry Potter or any of these books for that matter, because we've got a big list to go through. But yeah, if you like Harry Potter, you'll probably enjoy my book, even though my book is still pretty different from Harry Potter in the sense that it's high fantasy, it's not low fantasy, and it's more the flavor of something like Lord of the Rings or some of the other books we'll get into. But the reading experience, I think, feels more like Harry Potter in the sense that it's very character driven, there's a lot of humor, and yeah, I love writing dialogue. I love writing dialogue, so there's a lot of fun, entertaining banter and back and forth between the characters, just as there is in Harry Potter. For books that are part of a series, I'm just gonna hold up the first one, but I will say with Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite, and it's definitely one of my top 10 favorite books of all time. But with each series, I'm just gonna hold up the first one because otherwise this pile would probably go up to my ceiling. So I'm gonna be totally real with you guys. I am having kind of a bad mental health day today, but I gotta film this video. In fact, I got a few videos I gotta film, so it's not ideal. I greatly would have preferred to wake up in just the perfect mood for filming. But sometimes you wake up, you're in a bad mood, but you look at your to-do list and filming is on there. But honestly, I think talking about some of my favorite books, I think it might just do the trick to put me in a good mood, because talking about my favorite books always just makes me feel a little better. Okay, so the next book that I feel worth mentioning is A Series of Unfortunate Events. So this is The Bad Beginning, which is the first book in the 13-book series called A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. If you were a kid in the early 2000s, you probably remember these books, but to this day they still have a cult following, and I am a part of that cult following. I did get separated from these books for many, many years though. Like, I think I read the first 3 or 4 when I was a kid, and then I just moved on to other books and I never finished the series. And eventually I kind of fell away from reading altogether. I didn't really do any reading in my teen years, not gonna lie. I was too busy making music and just being, for the lack of a better word, a little. But then in my early adulthood, I slowly but surely got back into reading, and this is one of the first books that I read while I was getting back into reading, and I immediately binged the entire series, and I was so hooked and so excited to see how it would progress and eventually end in the end, which is book 13 in the series. I just remember reading this series when I was in my early 20s. Like, this was just, oh my god, like that was just such a highlight of my early 20s, was reading this series. And then shortly after I started rereading it, the Netflix show got announced and eventually came out, and I'm just so obsessed with the Netflix show. Oh my god, I'm anything Neil Patrick Harris. Now, my book is pretty different from this book. There's not really a lot of direct comparisons, but I think the reason why I love this book so much, well, I mean, I love the gothic aesthetic and I also love the humor. Both of those things just do something to my brain. But beyond that, I think it's the fact that the adults in this book and in this series are just so incompetent. And as a kid, I found that just really satisfying. And as an adult, I found it even more satisfying, because it's so funny. When you're a kid, they tell you that adults know everything and you kind of blindly believe them. At least I did. And then when you become an adult, you're like, yeah, I'm an adult and I do not know everything. And all of those adults that were telling me I was wrong as a kid and I was actually right, they all did not know everything, even though I was told that they knew everything and they knew better because they were adults. This series illustrates that perfectly, and I think that same dynamic is very present in my book between Aurora and her parents, and there was definitely a direct inspiration there. And not just Aurora and her parents, but like Aurora and a lot of the adults and a lot of the authority figures. There's really like a questioning of authority in my books and also in these books, because in these books, authority really lets the Baudelaire orphans down. There's very similar ideas in my book. I was rereading this like right before I started writing Aurora and Luna. It was one of the books that got me back into reading and also made me want to write my own book. And so even though it's a pretty different book, I was still very, very inspired by it. And also, I love that this series has a mystery element to it. Same with Harry Potter, it has a mystery element to it. I love a mystery embedded into a fantasy world, and while this is not really a fantasy book, at least traditionally speaking, I do kind of consider this to be a fantasy book, because there's definitely an element of world building in this world, whatever this world is. It remains nameless and timeless and placeless, but there's definitely a world in a series of unfortunate events. So I do think there's an element of speculative fiction in this, but then there's a mystery plot woven into it, and that's the same with Harry Potter. It's a fantasy book, but there's a mystery to each book, and I just love that. That just does something to my brain. And I honestly, I haven't read very many straight up mystery novels. I may want to get into that because when I read a fantasy novel with mystery in it, I'm hooked. So maybe I'll become a lover of mystery. But yeah, I've just never really gotten into mystery. If you have any good recommendations, leave them in the comments section. I'm literally setting a timer on my phone as I talk about each book, so I don't just go on and on and on, because otherwise I probably will. So other than Harry Potter, there are some other pretty direct inspirations for Aurora and Luna, and one of them is A Song of Ice and Fire, otherwise known as Game of Thrones. I was pretty deep in the Game of Thrones TV show by the time I started wanting to write my own fantasy novel, and eventually I started reading the book series. As you can see, I've got these beautiful Bible-like editions of the books. I just love them. I actually bought them last year and gave away the mass market paperbacks I had before because these are just so beautiful. Now, when I originally came up with the idea for Aurora and Luna, I had never yet seen or read Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire. But if you watched my recent video on the journey that I went through and the journey that the manuscript went through, then you'll know that there was like a 2-year gap between when I got the idea and when I actually started seriously writing it. And in that 2-year gap, that was when I started to watch and read Game of Thrones. I was just obsessed. I was just hooked. One thing that I really love about this series is how character driven it is and how psychological it is. And that's something that you don't always get in fantasy, particularly in a lot of like epic fantasy and high fantasy and classic fantasy. It's a lot more world building driven and plot driven. This is very character driven. Obviously there's a lot of world building and obviously there's a great plot. You'll know if you've seen the show or read the books, but it is very character driven, and I love character driven fiction. I want to latch myself onto a character or 2 or 3 or however many characters you'll give me that I love. I'll latch myself onto all of them and watch them go on a journey. That's why I love a show like Breaking Bad, because in Breaking Bad you're really watching these characters go on these journeys. In particular, you're watching Walter White get more and more evil, and simultaneously you're watching Jesse Pinkman get more and more good. I just love that. I love a character arc, and oh my god, these books, this show, this story, George R.R. Martin knows how to do that. And that is something that I am really studying as I read and reread these books. I'm really studying how he does that and making notes for my own book. Not that I want to copy it exactly. My book is still very different in vibe from Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones is very dark. And my book is definitely not dark fantasy. There are dark elements to it, but I would describe it being more like Harry Potter in the sense that there's light and there's dark, and Game of Thrones leans a lot more on the dark side. So there is still a pretty different flavor, but I really am impressed by the character work in this story. And it's something that I took a lot of inspiration from and continue to take tons of inspiration from as I continue to write the series. Okay, so let's talk about the other pretty direct inspiration for my book. The Hunger Games. Oh man, I love this trilogy so much. It is so good, and I love both of the prequels, especially the one that came out last year, Sunrise on the Reaping. That was such a good book, and the other one's good too, although I will say I think in a sense I do prefer the movie because I don't love being from President Snow's point of view for an entire novel. But I do think that story is really good. I'm actually going to do a Hunger Games reread this year because of the new movie coming out. This book really blew my mind, and I know that for some people who had already read dystopian fiction, they're going to be like, yeah, like whatever, it's nothing special. No, it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's not just because of the high concept dystopian fiction part of it, it's also just amazing for other reasons. This was my first dystopian book. That really got me thinking, because a lot of fantasy, you know, centers around war, rebellion, revolution, and my book definitely does. But this was the book that really got me to think really, really critically about our own world, the real life Muggle world, and start to really dissect how things actually work systemically, politically. I was also taking poli-sci at the time, and up until that point, I never thought that I would ever really get into politics, but this book and that poli-sci class and that poli-sci teacher, both of those influences really got me interested in politics, and both of those influences definitely were the cause of me coming up with the idea that I came up with. I already knew that I wanted to write a fantasy novel, but I just didn't have that idea that made me actually want to sit down and write. But this book, alongside studying political science, it woke me up to some of the injustices in our world, and for the first time, I really genuinely cared about people other than me and my inner circle. Like, it just expanded my scope, my view of the world. That is a big part of how the idea for Aurora and Luna came to me, because a big part of the Sun and Moon Saga is the injustice that the upper class Earthlings do to the lower class Earthlings. And that's just talking about the Earthlings. There's also all of the races native to New Camelot that all of the Earthlings have done harm to. The fairies, the Merfolkians, the elves, all of those races feel as though the Earthlings who have settled on New Camelot have basically stolen their planet and ruined their whole way of life and just basically taken everything for themselves. I wouldn't have come up with that idea if I wasn't getting invested into politics myself, and this book was definitely a gateway in getting there. And beyond that, like, something that I love about this book is, again, the characterization, and also, despite the fact that it's such dire circumstances, there's so many little cozy moments. Like when Suzanne Collins slows us down to describe eating some bread and cheese, and the characters like really taste the bread and the cheese. Damn, now I want bread and cheese. But when she really describes some small detail like that, it's just so nice, and it just contrasts so well with the horrors that the main characters are otherwise going through. And again, that's something that I took inspiration with when I was working on Aurora and Luna, and that I still take inspiration with as I continue to write the series, is I love a book that has high stakes, yes, but I also love it when we just slow down and breathe and just ground ourselves in the here and now. That's something that I tried to incorporate into my book, and this book is really good at doing that. Surprisingly good at doing that. So during that year of college where I was studying political science, I was actually doing a psychology degree. Poli-sci was one of the electives I got to choose. I had a lot of electives I got to choose, which was great. So I needed poli-sci, I needed some social sciences like sociology, anthropology, all that was great. I also needed English. There was a really practical English class that I could have taken, academic writing strategies. My mom really wanted me to take that one, but I was like, no, Mom. No, I'm not gonna take that practical English class that will actually help me write my papers. No, I'm gonna take Arthurian legend. Honestly, like, as impractical as it was to take that class, it was extremely practical because it's almost like it opened up a secret hidden door for me, because I had always been intrigued by Arthurian legend, but it's not really something that a lot of people talk directly about, even if they are reading things and watching things that are clearly directly influenced by Arthurian legend. Like, a lot of the fantasy that we love is so inspired by Arthurian legend, and my book definitely is New Camelot. But it wasn't something that I really knew a lot about in sort of a research sense. It's just something that I had an intuitive understanding of from reading fantasy. So when I saw that there was a course, an English literature course that was specifically about Arthurian legend, I was like, I have to take that. My heart and soul was just telling me that I had to take it. So even though my mom tried to convince me not to, I took it because it still counted as my elective. Even if I didn't learn anything practical. So we read a lot of different interpretations of King Arthur, but we mostly focused on T.H. White's The Once and Future King series, and I fell in love with this book. I've read it several times. If you can't tell, it's pretty banged up. I think if I read it again, I'm gonna have to get a new edition because, yeah, this is pretty banged up. And this is actually all 5 books in one. So this is an entire series right here that I hold in my hand. I just fell in love with it. Because it felt like mysterious information that had always been in the things that I loved was finally available to me. And not only was I reading it, but I was also being taught about it by a teacher. We were going through this as a class, and the teacher was discussing it and giving us the historical context, and we were really diving deep. So it was a different reading experience than if I had just picked this up at the library and read it. Like, it was really understanding the context of everything that appears in this series and the history of it, the origins of it. We read lots of different iterations of King Arthur, as I said, so this wasn't the only one, but this was the main one that we focused on. And yeah, I just fell in love. I just fell in love. There's so much to say, but my book series was very inspired by King Arthur. I mean, by the time we start Aurora and Luna, you're already in the world that I created, so you're already in a completely different fantasy world. But the origins of the series take place in my interpretation of King Arthur's world. A lot of people have asked me why Aurora and Luna has the number 4 before it when it's the first book in the Sun and Moon Saga. And that is because I actually have a prequel series completely outlined. Once I've finished the last book in the main series, I'm gonna go back and write the prequel series. And that part of the story is heavily inspired by King Arthur because it is a story of how these witches and warlocks left medieval Europe and journeyed across galaxies, from the Milky Way galaxy into the Magical Way galaxy, the Provedo galaxy, and eventually found a planet that was similar enough to Earth for them to live on. They named it New Camelot, but it actually had a name before that, and if you read Aurora and Luna, you will find out what that name is. So the origins of Aurora and Luna are very inspired by Arthurian legend, and I'm just obsessed with Arthurian legend. I literally have an Arthurian tarot deck. I will definitely be reading this again at multiple points in my life. I'm obsessed. Now we're gonna talk about something that actually isn't a book, but was still a pretty direct inspiration for my book, specifically in the world building, and that is the Elder Scrolls. I love the Elder Scrolls. I love the Elder Scrolls. Now, when I first started playing, I started with Skyrim, but I didn't fully feel the click. I had never played an open RPG before, so I just didn't fully get it. I don't know, Something about it just didn't click with me. I did like it, but I don't know, I always found myself going to other games. This felt very slow paced. And then randomly, one day later, I put Oblivion in my PS3. Now, everyone had been saying that Skyrim was better than Oblivion, but I was just like immediately obsessed with and hooked on Oblivion, and still am to this day. This is actually my favorite game of all time. I love this game and I will be replaying it until the day I die. I absolutely love Oblivion, and I love Skyrim too. I did eventually go back and play Skyrim, and I do love Skyrim, but Oblivion is definitely my favorite. I love how bright it is, I love how beautiful it is, how colorful it is. I think Skyrim, while it's beautiful, it's also a little bit bleak. Oblivion just has this brightness to it that I love. I have not yet played the remastered edition, but one day I will, I think. So yeah, my book and my world, they were really inspired by these games. I adore these games. As I said, this is my favorite game of all time, hands down. And I actually really love video games as an inspiration for writing, and I actually find video games to be really good for my creative inspiration and just for my mental health. I know video games kind of get a bad rap, but I actually think that, at least for me, the pros really outweigh the cons. As I said, I was very inspired by Cyrodiil and Tamriel when I created my world, New Camelot. Kind of similar to these games, while dark things happens in these stories, it's still a place that I would love to go and live in. And that's something that I similarly wanted to have happen in my fantasy world for readers, is even though dark things happen in my world, and even though there is a dystopian element to my world, I didn't want it to be so dystopian and so dark that you would just never actually want to live there. I wanted it to have the feel that these games have, that it is a living, breathing world. It is a living, breathing world. That was one of the things I think that really just blew me away when I first played Oblivion. It's just like, there is a real living, breathing world on this disc. Like, that to me, as a 20-year-old, just was crazy. And yeah, I wanted my book to have that same kind of immersive, living, breathing quality, but also I wanted it to be a place that you would actually want to go and visit, maybe even live in, the way that I would love to visit and live in these games, even though dark things happen there. And similar to the last, this is not a book series, it is a movie series, Star Wars. I am obsessed with Star Wars. I am such a Star Wars nerd, because here's the thing, I didn't actually see Star Wars until I was 23. I saw it pretty late in life. For Star Wars anyway. But once I saw it, I was obsessed. And I went through a period of time where at least once a week, every Friday night, I would watch one of the Star Wars movies, and I would just cycle through the original trilogy. So one week I'd watch A New Hope, the next week I'd watch The Empire Strikes Back, the next week I would watch Return of the Jedi, and I would just cycle through and cycle through and cycle through because I was just obsessed. And even though a lot of people would say that Star Wars is sci-fi, I mean, for one thing, I also enjoy sci-fi, but I would consider it to be fantasy with a sci-fi flavor. So while my book doesn't have the same sci-fi flavor of Star Wars, it's definitely a high fantasy flavor. I think the way that the magic works in my world, especially the soft magic, the mystical, unknown magic, it's very inspired by how the Force works in Star Wars. The cosmos in my world, I mean, that's the source of all the magic, but the soft magic in particular is run by the cosmos because it's not as easily wielded by the Vulcans, by the humans. That magic system is very inspired by the Force. Alrighty, now we're gonna talk about Tolkien, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. Like Star Wars, I did not grow up on Tolkien. I grew up on Harry Potter and A Series of Unfortunate Events and other books like that. So this is something that I got into as an adult, like Star Wars. And I wasn't like an immediate diehard fan, but I think slowly but surely I'm becoming one. I think I'm becoming one of those people that's going to do a Lord of the Rings movie marathon every year. Tolkien's writing style kind of had to grow on me, but oh my god, it has. I felt like I should mention Tolkien's work because his work, it's now directly influential to me because I'm becoming a fan by and by, but also his work has been so influential on so many of the fantasy books and whatnot that I love. Like reading The Lord of the Rings for the first time, it became abundantly clear to me just how much my favorite game, Oblivion, is inspired by The Lord of the Rings. So I know that even before I was directly inspired by it, I know I was inspired by it because I was inspired by the fantasy zeitgeist. My books definitely have the flavor of Lord of the Rings. There's elves, there's dwarves, there's magic, there's dragons, but I do everything in my own way. So I do put my own unique spin on the classic Tolkien fantasy vibe, but it still very much is that classic fantasy vibe. So if you like this kind of fantasy, you'll probably like my book. This is how you know I'm becoming a fan, when I spend like $100 on a book. But these are some beautiful special editions of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, illustrated by Tolkien himself. Obviously, I found that pretty inspiring, seeing as I'm someone who's learning how to draw so they can illustrate their own work. I'm really excited to read these again. I enjoyed them the first time through, particularly The Hobbit. I think I like The Hobbit more than The Lord of the Rings, but I think The Lord of the Rings is the kind of book where I'm gonna enjoy it more on a reread. So I'm really excited to reread both of these books in these beautiful new special editions that I picked up for my birthday last year. Setting timers is not really working. My camera is already low battery. I've still got a big stack of books to go through. So we're just gonna try to do these last few rapid fire. Similarly to Lord of the Rings, my book was inspired by Aragon by Christopher Paolini. Now, I didn't actually read this book until I already started writing Aurora and Luna, so it wasn't like a direct inspiration for the book concept, but it did inspire me in how I executed the concept. I never read this book as a kid. I only read it as an adult. I'm not really sure why, because it would have been totally right up my alley as a kid, but it just never fell into my hands, I guess. I mean, as kids, we're almost like victim to what our parents and our relatives give us for Christmas, so. Anyway, my, at the time, boyfriend, he had read these books and he had really loved them. And he was like, I kind of think the book you're writing is a little more similar in vibe to something like The Inheritance Cycle than it is to Harry Potter. And so I checked out the book because I was curious. And yeah, definitely. Because this book, it is high epic fantasy, but it's also young adult, and it's definitely a bridge between fantasy for children and fantasy for adults. And that is something that I was very much trying to do with my own book. So I took a lot of inspiration from this book. I actually have been, for the first time, reading through the full series. I'm on book 3 right now. I'm just loving it. I think I loved it even more on a second read through. And I also enjoyed book 2, and I'm pretty early into book 3. I'm actually just taking a break to read a biography right now. I'm reading Beatrix Potter's biography, but more on her in a minute. But yeah, I'm loving this series, and this first book in particular was really, really good. And definitely, if you like this book, if you grew up reading this book, definitely check out my book, Aurora and Luna. It'll be right up your alley. Another inspiration for the Sun and Moon Saga was Sailor Moon, particularly because they are a group of magical girls that all get their power from one particular planet, and that is very similar to my own book, where I don't want to give spoilers, but basically there's a group of main characters and they all have magic powers, and each of them is related to one of the elements of magic. And I'm not gonna say any more because I don't want to spoil the book. Now, I actually wasn't reading or watching Sailor Moon while I was writing Aurora and Luna, so I think this inspiration was totally subconscious. I think it was from my childhood, because it wasn't until a few years ago when I read through the manga, that was when I was like, oh my god, this is pretty similar in concept to my own book. Not in the sense that it's a ripoff of Sailor Moon, but just in that one little idea where you've got this group of 5 characters and they all have their own unique magical ability, and they all kind of are working under a particular element, or in this case a planet, and there is a lead character, but they're all kind of special in their own way. I think this show, which I watched as a kid in the 90s, I think it was still in my subconscious. Also, generally, like, I think my book has a little bit of a manga anime feel to it. I'm reading Cardcaptor Sakura right now, and there's so much romance in that series. I love it. And the characters, they're just so melodramatic, and I definitely incorporate a little bit of that into my own fantasy world, even though it's not a manga, it's not an anime. Like, it's not gonna be as over the top as something like that, but I just like to incorporate just a little bit of that melodrama in there. And I've been told by people who are big anime manga fans that my book has a manga anime feel to it. I'm actually still getting into manga and anime. I'm not like a huge manga anime person. I've only read a few of them and I've only seen a few of them, but I definitely think there's just like a general inspiration from those mediums. Magical Girl, anime and manga in particular. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about another one of my favorite books. I think my favorite book of all time, actually, and that is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I am just so inspired by this book. And you know, like A Series of Unfortunate Events, it's not that the story is that similar, but it's the writing style of Kenneth Grahame. I think he's my favorite writer. I still haven't read all of his books yet, so I don't want to make that bold claim, but I love reading this book. I read it every year in the springtime. So my camera died, so I don't know what I was saying, but I do know that I was talking about The Wind in the Willows and Kenneth Grahame's writing style. I love Kenneth Grahame's writing. And honestly, even though The Wind in the Willows is a very different kind of fantasy from Aurora and Luna and the Sun and Moon Saga, I still felt the need to mention it just because, number one, The Wind in the Willows is very nature-based, because it's literally giving these human elements, these human qualities to nature, to animals. And in my series and in my world, nature plays a very crucial element to the world building. So there's that. But also, when I was doing the line edits for Aurora and Luna, I really took inspiration from The Wind in the Willows, and I'm in no way comparing my prose to the prose of Kenneth Grahame, but he is one of my biggest inspirations as a writer, not just in story, but in language. I love his descriptions of things. I love the way he paints a picture, and that is something that I tried to do with Aurora and Luna. Similarly, it would feel weird to not mention Beatrix Potter, and I'm reading her biography right now, as I mentioned earlier in the vlog. Again, if you could call her work fantasy, it's a very, very different kind of fantasy than the Sun and Moon Saga. The Sun and Moon Saga is like classic epic fantasy, but with a character-driven approach. And once again, Beatrix Potter's work is like anthropomorphic animal type fantasy. So it's a very different kind of book. But as a kid, I was just so inspired by her world and by her characters, her animal characters. I absolutely love talking animals. I mean, who doesn't love talking animals? And honestly, Aurora and Luna does have a talking animal in it, so I'm just so inspired by her work, her as a person. She's definitely my hero, or one of my heroes. Honestly, she is one of the reasons why I wanted to be a writer at all, and likewise why I wanted to start illustrating my work as well, because she was both a writer and an illustrator, and an amazing illustrator at that. Like, look at how detailed that art is. And that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to mention her on this list, because I did start illustrating my work. I illustrated the cover for Aurora and Luna, and there's also 2 maps that I drew by hand in there. That came from reading and watching Beatrix Potter, because I watched the show in the 90s. That came from taking in her work as a kid, seeing this woman in the show, because there's a live action component to the show where you actually watch her write and illustrate the stories. Seeing her create this whole world through her writing and her art, I saw that as a kid and I wanted to do it too. And I'm so grateful that I am still doing it and that I have not let that side of myself go. That is very much my inner child, and I'm grateful that I am delighting my inner child every single day. In general, I'm very inspired by children's fiction of that time, that turn of the century children's fiction. I'll just give an honorable mention to A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, and another one to J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. I just love that time for children's fiction. It's just so beautiful and so darling. So I'm very inspired by that time in general. I would say that my 3 favorite fiction genres to read are turn of the century children's fiction, and obviously fantasy, and also comics and manga, even though I'm still kind of getting into manga. Yeah, those are my 3 favorite fiction genres to read. Fantasy, turn of the century children's literature, and comics and manga. Okay, I've got 2 more inspirations to mention. Number 1 is fairy tales and folklore, and I mean this generally, but here I have Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm. I am so inspired by fairy tales and folklore in my world and in the stories that I tell. A lot of the magic and the world building is pulled directly from fairy tales, and yeah, I love fairy tales, I love folklore, I love myths and legends and fables. I'm just a big nerd for all that kind of stuff. Growing up, I actually had this book, which is a collection of fairy tale retellings. This book was just, oh my god, it was just so essential to my childhood. Like, this book is a huge part of my childhood. When you get to part 2 of Aurora and Luna, the Rebel Coven, this picture might look kind of familiar. I definitely took these handless gloves that Zelina has, make her tea and do other tasks for her. I definitely took these from Beautiful Vasilissa, which is a Russian folktale. There's just lots of little things that I've borrowed from fairy tales and folklore, and this is the book that I had as a kid. I absolutely adore this book. It is the retellings, and I do prefer to try to read, I don't really want to say the originals because it's not that the Brothers Grimm, it's not that they wrote all those fairy tales, they just collected them and wrote them down, but they didn't actually come up with the stories. Those were passed orally for a long time before they were ever written down. Obviously, you're never really getting the original, the true original, but I do try to read things from as close to the original as we can get. But this book will always be near and dear to my heart, even though the stories have been retold in a way where they're more suitable for children of the 90s anyways. I don't really know if kids would be reading something like this now, but yeah, this book will always be near and dear to my heart, and I tend to pull it off the shelf and flip through it when I need inspiration for a plot or for magic or for world building. It just takes me back to being a kid and just letting my imagination run wild. That's the space that I have to get into when I am writing today. And last but certainly not least, I need to mention Disney movies. Disney movies were a huge inspiration for the Sun and Moon Saga and for Aurora and Luna. I grew up on Disney movies and I still love them to this day, and I am very inspired by them when writing my own fantasy stories. Of course, the work that I write is darker than Disney. It's a little more Disney's Black Cauldron, there's a deep cut, than it is Disney's Snow White. But you know, even Snow White has very dark elements to it. I'm definitely a Disney villain kind of person. I've just always been obsessed with the villains. Even when I was a kid, my favorite character in Snow White was the evil queen. I don't know why. I guess she was just the most interesting. She's definitely the most proactive. I would say that in terms of like darkness to whimsical, my book is kind of smack dab in the middle. There are very dark elements, but there's also very whimsical elements. So I like to pull both from things like Disney movies, but also A Song of Ice and Fire. Okay, that is gonna be it for today's video. This was a long one, so thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed this cozy chat about books and movies and games. I would love to do more cozy chats talking about books and movies and games and music and all that good artsy, nerdy, geeky stuff. This is my favorite kind of stuff to talk about, so this was a really fun one for me to film, and it definitely did improve my mood, except for when my camera died. Oh my god, I almost crashed out when my camera died. I'm glad that I was able to get back and finish the video. If you like the things that I've been talking about in this video, definitely pick up your copy of Aurora and Luna. If you love the things that I've been talking about in this video, then you're probably gonna enjoy my book. So definitely check this out. It is live now. The links are in the doobly-doo. And if you are kind of interested but you're not yet sold on the idea, just click the link in my description to join my free newsletter. When you sign up, you get the first act of this book sent directly to your inbox, absolutely free. So it's a great way to start reading this book and see if it's for you. Please like this video and subscribe if you have not already. Right now I am putting out a video every single week to promote Aurora and Luna, so be sure that you've turned on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever my videos go live. And leave me a comment letting me know, have you read any of these books? Do you like them? Do you dislike them? Let me know in the comments below what you think. These are some of my favorite books, although it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but these are the books that inspired Aurora and Luna. And if you would like to support the channel, as well as my writing and all of the other creative work that I do, then please consider joining us in the Lunar Coven. That's my Patreon and my Substack. It's the same content on both. Just pick your preferred platform. The Lunar Coven gets all kinds of fun stuff like early access to my work and bonus videos, and it's just a really great way to support me, other than, of course, buying my book. And I'm just gonna read you another review that someone left for Aurora and Luna. I think this is such a great choice for anyone looking to get back into reading like me. The story moves at a good pace to keep you engaged without giving you whiplash, and the characters are interesting and complex. From the start, Aurora's inner conflicts are somehow relatable despite being based in a fantastical world. The world is quite different than other fantasy novels I've read, and I enjoyed reading something new. I also found myself feeling more creative and inspired to draw when I usually struggle to find inspiration. Thank you so much for that lovely review. I really, really appreciate it. But I think that's gonna be it for today's video. Thanks again for sticking with me, and I will see you next week. Until then, order your copy of Aurora and Luna and stay cozy.